Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Diagnosis podcast. Today, we've got a very lovely special guest, Caoimhe. She's here to share her story about what it's like living with type 1 diabetes and also now working as a nurse. So she's really lovely. Welcome, Caoimhe. Lovely to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's amazing. And, she's got such a beautiful story that I can't wait to share. So let's jump right into it. And let's just start a little bit about you, Caoimhe. If you can just introduce yourself, what stuff you like, just give the audience a bit of a taste of who you are and what you're into.
Okay, so I'm Caoimhe. My parents are both Irish. They moved over to Australia and had me, hence the crazy Irish name and the strong Aussie accent. So I obviously grew up in Australia. We moved back to Ireland. My sister was born there. Came back to Australia after that, and then when I was 8 years old, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So it was over 26 years ago now. It's been a very steep learning curve over the years. I originally worked in media and communications, and the last 5 years changed degrees, started in nursing, and now I'm working as a diabetes educator.
Fantastic. First of all, I didn't realize it was Irish. That makes a whole lot more sense. Why it's spoken so differently to how it's spelled.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So you lived in Ireland for a period of time as well?
I did, yeah, when I was very young. So I can't remember exactly, but my parents had me here, and then it would have been maybe 6 to 12 months later, they decided to move back, yeah.
Yeah, so your diagnosis with diabetes and your whole experience was in Australia?
Yeah, in Australia. Yeah.
Okay. And do you still have family back home?
I do, yeah. So all of my family is still back home, except obviously my immediate family, mum and dad and siblings. But yeah, everyone's still over there. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So good. So let's talk about your experience with diabetes. And you did mention, this whole process started when you were 8. Can you take us back to what you remember about being diagnosed? Was there a day? Do you remember your life just changing? What was it like?
Yeah, so I remember it pretty vividly. Everything was normal up until the day that it wasn't. It was a very rapid decline. My family and I had gone on a road trip to Queensland, and I just remember feeling absolutely horrible the whole way up there. I was constantly complaining like I was exhausted. I needed Dad to stop the car every 5 minutes because I needed to go to the toilet. I was so thirsty. So we were stopping off at McDonald's every now and then, and I was drinking like a full sugar Fanta.
Wow.
And my mum was a nurse also, so I think the alarm started going off in her head, and I just remember her saying to Dad, we need to take her somewhere like ASAP as soon as we get there. And I remember Mum taking me to one of like the urgent medical centres when we got to Queensland, and the doctor said, no, she's fine, I think she just has a viral illness. And Mum is trying to, advocate for me and is verging on like the state of getting a bit aggressive with him, and she's saying, I think she's diabetic, just do a blood test. And he refused. So Mum and I got on the first flight back to Sydney, and immediately I was diagnosed, got rushed to the ED, and it was all hands on deck. Very traumatic for me. I had no idea what was going on. I remember Mum being in the room with me, but I was being kind of held down by like 3 or 4 medical professionals because I just wouldn't stay still. I had no idea what was happening. And I spent about a week in the children's hospital there. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's, first of all, let's talk about a mother's instinct, right? Like, I love that she just knew and she was an advocate for you, because as a kid, you don't know what's going on. You really need a strong figure in your life who's like, no, this isn't my child, there's something, you need to investigate it. So props to her for taking that seriously and
I know, thank you, Mum.
But also that's a lot to go through at 8, and you're from what I'm hearing, it was just sort of the switch changed, like it wasn't gradual.
No, it was just instant. Like I was fine one day, and the next day I was, yeah, just off.
Yeah. And do you remember what you really understood at that age? I mean, they would have said, "Oh, you have this thing called diabetes," but what did it mean to you at 8? Like, what did you understand about your whole situation?
I honestly had no idea. I didn't even know what diabetes was. We didn't have any sort of family, like no one in my family had ever been diagnosed with diabetes. I remember one of the endocrinologists saying to me in the hospital, like, you're so lucky that your mum realised, because tomorrow or even the next day you might not have been here. And I was a bit like, wow, but then also I was like, but now I have to live with it. So am I lucky?
Mm,
But yeah, I had no, it took me quite some time to sort of accept it and understand what
of
was
course.
happening. But most of the education was delivered to my parents
Yeah.
because they were the ones who were having to check on me during the night, come to school, check on me, etc. I think I was just too young to comprehend. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And obviously this was the first experience for your parents too, right? Because no one in your family had it. Of course your mum being a nurse would have helped, but what was it like for them processing all of this?
Looking back at it now, I think it would have been quite a shock. I think they held themselves together quite well. Um, I knew my dad, because he didn't have that medical knowledge, was a bit tentative to sort of step in. So mum became that like sole carer. And I do remember her saying, like, I can't take the time off from work to go and check on Caoimhe today. You're going to have to step up at some point. But I think they were both terrified, really. Yeah.
Of course, that's a lot. And, for your siblings, you said you're the oldest of three. How did your siblings, experience it all? Do you remember what it was like for them?
I honestly don't. So they're both younger than me. My sister's
Yeah.
4 years younger, my brother's 8 years younger. So my brother was a newborn at this stage.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I really don't know. I
Mm,
mean, I live with my sister now, and I feel like I'm still trying to educate her about what could happen, or what I need to do. But yeah, I don't think it was something that was different to them. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
because they were both so young, they kind of grew up around it. It wasn't like a big
Mm,
deal. Yeah.
yeah, yep, yep. And they understood. I mean, yeah, it would have been their whole childhood sort of understanding that this is what it is.
Well, yeah, and I remember my sister telling me that, like, back in the day, my mum said, you've got to be nice to Caoimhe because she's got diabetes. And my brother and sister were a bit like, oh, diabetes, so is she going to die?
Oh
Like,
God, yeah.
yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, growing up, obviously, what was it actually like in school growing up with diabetes and being a teenager with diabetes? Because,
Yeah.
we know being a teenager is hard enough. I had like constant fights with my parents and didn't want to listen to anything. But then you've got a condition where you have to take responsibility or else there's, really bad consequences. So what was it like
Yeah.
growing up?
So primary school was quite difficult. So when I went back to primary school after being diagnosed, my mum had to develop sort of a safety plan for the school if anything was to happen. She was still taking responsibility. We did have a nurse at the school, but I don't know if back then, like this is a long time ago, if that was appropriate. And mum felt, mum had the time to come in and look after me, so to speak. I do remember, because I was so young, kids didn't really understand, and it was a scary thing, and there was questions about, is this contagious, all the time. So as a little kid, I was a bit, I don't know the word for it, but a bit offended, a bit upset. Like, I thought I wasn't going to have any friends anymore because of this. Um, I missed out on a lot of things during school, unfortunately, mostly due to like the lack of awareness and education. But school camps I missed out on. There was a lot of like school sporting activities and things I was just told I wasn't able to participate in. So it was very difficult in my younger years. And then as I got older and went to high school, it probably got more difficult. I mean, I had a better understanding. My mum had, made me take responsibility after years of me saying, no, 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 you have to help me.
Yeah.
But I guess I fell into that kind of place where I didn't want to look after myself anymore, and it was, too big of a burden for me to carry. And
Mm.
I ended up quite sick, and that's my own fault because I decided, oh, what's the worst that could happen if I stopped taking my injections?
Yeah.
So yeah, it did become quite difficult. And then as you get older and there's, alcohol and parties and things like that, that also became another thing to manage. I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of the risks of drinking when
Mm.
you're on insulin, and found that out the hard way as well, and got scolded by my parents quite severely. But yeah, it was, I think the teenage years was a massive learning curve. Yeah, very
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. I never thought about all the challenges. I mean, even just socially, right? Like it's always in the back of your mind every time you hang out with your friends and everything like that. I can't imagine. That's really tough to deal with.
Because you don't want to miss out, and you don't want to say, oh, I can't do this because I'm different, sort of thing. But that's how I felt at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine there was one girl in my primary school. We were in year one, and I remember the only thing I remember of this girl is that she used to prick her finger every day, and we would see
No.
blood come out. And I just remember, thinking, oh my God, not in a mean way, but why? Like, what's wrong with
Yeah.
her? What's happening? And that's
Yeah.
all I remember. So
Yeah.
I can imagine in primary school it's different, and kids just, they don't know how to react to it. It's a lot
Yeah.
to process. Um, but I'm just, going through high school, I feel especially it's already so isolating. And I can imagine that this would have just taken a bit more of that toll to fit in, but also having to deal with all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for a long period of time, I did everything in secret. So I was going to the bathroom to take my insulin or to prick my finger, which isn't the most sanitary, but I just thought it was better for me to do it away from everyone because I didn't want, the looks or all the questions and, just reinforcing the fact that I was different. And yeah.
And when did that sort of change for you? Like, at what age did you sort of say, you know what, I'm just going to embrace who I am and not feel the need to hide it? Was it gradual, or did you just feel something click inside you?
I would say it was very gradual. School was very difficult in general. It probably wasn't until after school, so when I started studying at uni and started working, that I became a lot more open about talking about it. And I had obviously transitioned from the pediatric diabetes service into the adult service, and I just felt like everything was a bit more catered to me, and I had a better understanding, and I knew how to sort of look after myself a bit better. So then I did become a bit more open about it.
Yeah,
I wanted people that I worked with to know that I had diabetes,
yeah,
because I thought, if something ever happens to me, nobody's going to know, and like,
yeah,
what's going to happen then? So it was more of
yeah,
a safety measure for me. But yeah, I guess gradually over the years as I got older, maybe it was more of an acceptance thing. Like I
mm,
finally learned to accept it and not so much be proud of it, but like, why should I hide it? Like, this isn't
yeah,
a weird thing and it doesn't make me different, so to speak, but I should be, sort
yeah.
of, you know, telling people about it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the key points you mentioned to me is that education for diabetes was very poor, at least at that time growing up, for yourself and the people around you, what do you remember about education, for example, at school? Was there any support? What did it look like for you?
Yeah, good question. I can't recall there really being anything at school. I think from what my mum was telling me that the answer was that it was just we don't have enough resources for this. There was always like a type 1 diabetes poster in the nurse's room, but that's kind of as far as it went, really.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I really can't recall. Like, mum was
Yeah.
my kind of support person throughout all of it. There wasn't really anyone at school that I could talk to about it. And if I was feeling sick or I thought something was wrong, and I did go to the nurse's office, it was just, we'll call your mum to come and pick you up, and that was
See,
it.
that's sort of a shame because your mum was in the healthcare field, so you had that, knowledge. But for a family who was perhaps not medically inclined and they had a child with diabetes, that's a lot for them to suddenly pick up without that much education or support services in the
Yeah,
community. That's
yeah,
quite tough. And you did mention that you sort of bounced around from different services as well in the community,
yeah.
growing up, pediatric, then adult, and I'm assuming even within that. What was your experience like with all of that?
Transitioning from pediatrics to adult was very difficult. So I loved my endocrinologist at the pediatric service. And then when he told me, Quiva, you were supposed to transition to adults 2 years ago, but I kept you on because, I didn't feel you were ready, but I think you're ready now. And I was like, no, please don't send me there. Because I think we'd had, that bond, I suppose. And I felt like he understood me, etc. And then I did relocate when I finished school. So, I was now doing it all on my own. I had to find the services myself, and I had some good experiences. I also had some bad experiences. So I did move around quite a bit. But one thing that stuck out to me was that some of the nurses I was seeing in the clinics also had type 1 diabetes. So
Yeah, okay.
they would often come over and have a chat to me about, what they do and what insulin they're on, and I felt like that was quite nice, and it sort of did create that bond.
Mm.
The service that I'm at the moment, I'm in Brisbane. It is wonderful. Like,
Oh, that's
I
good.
probably switched over about 2 or 3 years ago and started seeing them, and I don't see myself leaving. So they're great. I feel really well supported. I'm still on multiple daily injections. So I've been on injections since diagnosis, but I will be transitioning to the pump,
Amazing.
which is another big learning curve, but it's something that I've put off for a number of years due to just anxiety.
Yeah.
But I do feel very well supported, so I'm excited to continue that with them.
That's wonderful. That's
Yeah,
really good. I'm
yeah.
glad you found, a home that you feel comfortable with now. And, we've been talking about diabetes. Of course, you have type 1 diabetes. And one of the things you mentioned to me is this sort of lack of understanding between type 1 and type 2, what life looks like between the two. And sort of in the community, pretty much people only know about type 2 diabetes. So, do you want to
Yeah.
explain just a little bit to the audience difference between type 1 and type 2 and what your treatment has looked like as a type 1 diabetic?
Sure. So when we talk about type 2 diabetes, there is multiple risk factors for developing type 2, which could be like genetic predisposition, including like family history, gestational diabetes as well. If you have that during pregnancy, there is a risk of developing type 2, but the management looks very different. So in type 2 diabetes, your body is still producing insulin. It just may either not produce enough, or in terms of like how the body is processing it, it can't utilize that insulin. So therapies might look at diet and exercise, metformin or other oral medications, and then insulin administration is kind of like the last sort of option. for
Yeah, it's like a
treatment.
stepwise approach, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And then in type 1 diabetes, it's an autoimmune condition. So you are born with it until something triggers it and then you're diagnosed. So it could be like a flu, chicken pox, something like that. I actually don't know what triggered mine because I don't
Mm.
remember having anything leading up to that. But there's a lot of research going on at the moment because lots of kids are being diagnosed post COVID. So,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, it's triggered by something, and the immune response in your body accidentally destroys all the beta cells in your pancreas that produces insulin. So the only treatment for this is to have insulin via injections or on an insulin pump. There's no other treatment, there's no cure, there's no prevention. You just get it, and this is the therapy for life, essentially. Um, so when I was diagnosed, we didn't have any of the technologies that we do now. So there was no like little sensors that people wear, no really funded insulin pumps or anything like that. So I went on to injections straight away. And back then, you would get the insulin in like a vial and it would sit in the fridge, and you'd have to swab it, and then you'd have a big syringe and you'd have to draw out the correct amount of units every time and then inject it. And the syringes were quite big at that point. So now they're only about 4 millimeters. So they're really tiny and they just go under the skin. So I guess my therapy has changed a lot in the last like 26 years. I am using one of the CGMs, like the continuous glucose monitors, and that will measure like my blood sugar 24 hours a day. So I'll only prick my finger if I feel off or I need to calibrate the sensor. But yeah, that's been very helpful. And as I said before, I'm still on injections, but they just look a bit different now. So they come in like a pre-filled pen, and you just screw the little needle onto the top, and it's a tiny needle, and you just inject, and then the needle gets chucked, and you keep the pen until it runs out.
Yeah, wow. So, there's been a lot of advancements over your lifetime as well in terms of diabetes. And I know they're now looking at, as you mentioned, the pumps and basically systems where you don't have to do as much labor continuously monitoring and, like the pinpricks back in the day where you had to do that pretty much like 3 or 4 times a day just to check your blood glucose. So things have progressed, I guess, with tech, which is a great sign.
They have, and it's very exciting as a health professional as well. But seeing all these advancements in tech and learning about it, and I think, like, as a nurse, I'm always wanting to learn more things. So keeping on top of that is very beneficial not only for my work but for me as well. So I really enjoy that aspect of it. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I want to bust some diabetes myths with you today. I wanted to talk about, first of all, you mentioned sport, where a lot of people thought you couldn't do any, but you were actually quite sporty. Take us through that.
Yeah, I think it was more of the fact that people were worried that if I did exercise and something happened, they didn't know what to do, and they didn't want to have that on their hands. But I was a very active kid growing up, so I swam twice a week. I did gymnastics. I did Irish dancing.
Oh,
I did
wow.
Irish dancing up until I was 18. I stopped during my high school exams, and then I never went back, unfortunately. But I never really had any issues with sport and diabetes. You just have to sort of take everything into consideration and make sure you don't have insulin on board in your system and you've had something
Yeah.
to eat beforehand. But yeah, I was very active and I never had any issues with living with diabetes and
That's really
participating
good
in
though, and I
sport.
think that's a great message for people to hear because a lot of people assume whenever you're diagnosed with a chronic condition, you just stuck in a box and you don't have a
Yeah,
life, and that's not
yeah.
true at all. And you can do a lot of normal things and live your normal life. So I think it's really inspiring to hear that, I can just do normal things. You just got to be a bit more prepared, but it doesn't stop you from living your life. Um, I think another thing you mentioned was food, and that a lot of people think that your diet's suddenly quite limited and you can't go out, you can't eat, it's a problem. What has your experience been like?
Yeah, I would say nothing has really changed for me. Growing up, I always had a sweet tooth, so I guess I'm just a bit more mindful of that. But yeah, in terms of diet, nothing has really changed. I just need to make sure that I'm counting my carbs and I'm injecting accordingly. But yeah, like you said before, it's just like you can still do everything and eat well, not everything, but you know what I mean. You can still,
Yeah,
you know, there's nothing that you need to avoid. It's just you need to have that planning
yeah,
in preparation for things. So I still go out a fair bit with my friends for lunches and dinners and things, and nothing's changed. I will say it does get a little bit prickly guessing carb counts for things,
yeah,
but like at the end of the day, it's easily corrected. So
yeah.
nothing's really changed in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's really great news. And I hear that you're quite foodie anyway, so I'm
Oh
sure
yes.
you love going out and trying different cuisines. So,
Yes, absolutely. Um, I think that because there is still that stigma about diabetes and limited understanding, even like through my work, when I see people that are newly diagnosed, they think I'm going to tell them they can't eat these things, and like I just straight up say that's not what we're doing here. Like my job is to help you understand what diabetes is and make better choices, but I'm never going to tell someone you can't eat this. Like it's not how it works. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And take me through that. What motivated you to go into the healthcare field yourself?
Um, I always had a fascination with hospitals as a kid, and this is before diagnosis. And then I was working in media and communications for about 5 years, and I did enjoy it, but I felt like I wasn't really getting enough out of it. And then I was living in Sydney. It was peak COVID, and I just thought, no, I've got to do something else. Like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. I need to do something a bit more exciting. And my mum encouraged me to apply and do nursing. And I think because she was a nurse, I had a very poor understanding of what nursing was. Because I just remember, her coming home like after shift work and going to bed at 7 a.m. in the morning. And I just thought, oh my God, that sounds terrible. There couldn't be anything worse than doing that job. But yeah, the more I understood, I was like, actually, no, nursing sounds like a really good fit for me. And it also opened the door to me exploring becoming a diabetes educator. So I did always have that in the back of my mind while I was studying nursing, but it's a bit of a long journey to get there. So I finished up with my Bachelor of Nursing and I enrolled to my diabetes education the following year because you have to wait 12 months. And I finished that last year. So I was lucky enough that my current place of employment where I've been working as a nurse, I linked in with the diabetes educator lead there and said, I'm really passionate about diabetes education. I've wanted to do this for so long. I would love to come on board. And that's where I am now.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. And what is it like having type 1 diabetes and then educating people about it? Do you feel like you just automatically connect with people? You have a lot more to share about your story?
I feel like I do have that connection. I don't always tell someone, I also have diabetes because I don't want to make it like, oh, I understand everything. I know exactly what you're going through. But I think it does create that like bond with someone. Diabetes, like it's so complex and it is really difficult. And I think unless you live with it, you don't really have that understanding. So I do like that I can empathize with clients in that way. It is a bit awkward when I'm in the middle of a consult with someone though, and then my alarm goes off telling me I'm having a hypo. But it is what it is. But yeah, I really enjoy the work that I do at the moment, and like being next to someone on their journey, whether they've just found out they have this diagnosis or it's something they've been struggling with for a number of years. I think it's really nice to have that connection with someone who also understands. Yeah.
And I think, look, it's not an easy diagnosis to live with. I think people will say, oh, yeah, you just got to take some insulin, but it's just sort of something that's constantly in the back of your mind, right? Like, oh, I got to count my carbs, take care of this, that, alter my life a little bit. So it is a lot for someone to process that this is going to be the rest of their life. And I think you just having that deep understanding would help, someone else going through the start of their journey. I think it's almost poetic in a way that you can help other people through this journey.
Yeah. I hope so anyway. I like to think that I'm making a difference. Small
Yeah.
difference.
Is there
Yeah.
any particular story of a patient that you recall that, anything that really struck or anything that you've seen as a diabetes educator that you will, remember?
Um there there was a time, so when I was doing my postgrad in diabetes education, I went on placement at the Children's Hospital here, which was like my dream job. So I was so grateful to go on placement there. And I went up to the wards with one of the diabetes educators, and it was a little girl who was about 5, and she'd just been diagnosed with type 1. And I guess meeting the parents, it really kind of struck a chord with me because I hadn't really thought about how my diagnosis had affected my parents back in the day. So, yeah, I kind of, they were very upset and tearful, and they didn't even know that type 1 was really like a thing that children could get. They
Mm,
just thought, oh, diabetes, but it only affects older people.
yeah.
So it was really nice to be like a part of that, alongside the diabetes educator there, showing like such empathy to the parents, and reiterating that there's nothing that you could have done to avoid this, and it's not your fault, and it's a chronic illness that they will have to live with long term, but they will still have a life, and nothing
Yeah.
needs to change really.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very emotional for me, and I was worried that I was going to start crying in front of the parents. So I was like, please don't do that, that's so unprofessional. But yeah, it was kind of like a big wake up call for me. Like, not something that I had really thought about to that extent prior to seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, because, not only is it affecting you as a kid, but as a parent, I think that that's where it would hit even harder because at least when you're a kid, you're sort of ignorance is bliss. You don't fully get what's going on, but as a parent, it's suddenly, something you have to take charge of. So yeah, that's really beautiful story and reflection. And I guess, if you did see little kids being diagnosed with diabetes, who are stressed and anxious, what would you say to them? What's something from your life that you've learned that you would tell anyone who's struggling through a new diagnosis?
Um, I would probably say that yes, it is difficult and it is very challenging, and people aren't always going to understand. But I think the sooner that you come to accept it and can sort of adapt self management behaviors that best suit yourself and your lifestyle, I think the easier to manage it will be. And nothing really has to change. You can still do whatever you want to do. You can still play sports. You can still eat cake and ice cream.
Yeah.
But realistically, nothing changes. It's just, I guess you kind of become your own healthcare professional full time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
But
true.
yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like, it is scary and it is terrifying in the first like the early stages, but things do get much easier to comprehend, and you can still live a full life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's really powerful, not only for diabetes, to be honest, but any chronic illness that you're diagnosed with at a young age. It's scary, but with modern medicine, we can do a lot to support you to live a really good life. And, touch wood, Australia is quite a great place with a great healthcare system that can support you through that. So, yeah, that's a really brilliant story, and I think it highlights a lot of your resilience as well growing up. And I just feel like from what you've gone through, you just have a lot more of this, determination as well to help others and things like that. What is your future like? What do you have on the cards? I mean, now you've just started your career essentially with diabetes education. Is there anything else in the works?
At this stage, no. I think I'm just trying to take a breather.
Yeah,
I would love to stay in diabetes education long term, but I think participating in research or something
yep,
in policy would really interest me. The yeah like our healthcare system is great, but I think there still needs to be improvements made in terms of
of
funding
course.
and access to tech and things like that for everyone. But I think I will always be doing something related to diabetes for the rest of my career. Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Is there a lot of diabetes type 1 support groups and community, groups that people could access if they wanted to?
There is. If you access the Diabetes Australia website, they often will advertise events that are on in
Yeah,
multiple
okay.
areas across Australia. Um, Not promoting like Facebook advice or anything like that, but there are a lot of people that use Facebook as well that try to link up with other people with diabetes to sort of have like that group aspect of
Yeah.
things. Yeah, so I mean, you can find anything on the internet these days, can't you?
Yeah, I was just thinking it might be good, especially for new families, going through a new diagnosis to hear from other families' experience. So it's good to know that, there are the networks there if you'd like to access them.
Yeah, and Breakthrough Type 1D, which was formerly the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, they host a lot of events and things like that for parents and caregivers of children with diabetes.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. Wow. And is there anything else you wanted to share, especially about diabetes? Any, final message of dispelling any stigma or anything basically the main thing you want people to take away from this episode and about living with type 1 diabetes?
I think probably would be that diabetes looks so different on anyone. One treatment is not going to work for the next person, and also in saying that one day is not going to look the same the next day. I think there really needs to be more sort of reduction in the shame that people with diabetes feel within the community. Not having like a perfect target range and things like that. It's one day, you can try again the next day. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Quiva, for joining me on this podcast. I
that's
think your
okay.
story is a lot more inspiring than you realize, just
Oh,
going through that journey and then also taking that leap to become a nurse, become a diabetes educator. That is really, really inspiring. And I think, without even realizing it, you would have, made a difference to so many people's lives through your work, but also through your advocacy and being so open and honest about your journey. So thank you so much for joining me today.
oh, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
No, of course.